Dragons have appeared in numerous fantasy stories, fairy tales, and in most mythologies, from the Americas to Europe, and from India to China. But not all dragons are the same and look the same, and of course their temper and abilities differ from myth to myth. So I decided to find the main types of dragons found in myths and fairy tales from all over the world. Let's begin. The typical Western dragon. The Western dragon is the common European dragon, found in folklore and mythology among the overlapping cultures of Europe. It is typically depicted as a huge, fire-breathing, scaly and horned lizard-like creature. It has wings, usually leathery and bat-like, and sometimes feathered, 2 or 4 legs, and a long, muscular tail. In folk tales, dragon's blood often contains unique powers, keeping them alive for longer or giving them poisonous or acidic properties. The typical dragon in Christian culture protects a cavern or castle filled with gold and treasure. An evil dragon is often associated with a great hero who tries to slay it, and a good one is said to give support or wise advice. Though a winged creature, the dragon is generally to be found in its underground lair, a cave that identifies it as an ancient creature of earth. Dragonnet. These dragons have the same appearance as Western dragons, however, they are significantly smaller. They might be as little as a finger or as large as a person. They are deadly despite their size because they hunt in packs and have toxic blood that is fatal when it comes in contact with your flesh. The Chinese dragon. The Chinese dragon, also known as Lung or Lung, is a legendary creature in Chinese mythology and folklore. The general appearance of the dragon can actually be seen as a composite of real animals: the trunk of a snake, scales of a carp, tail of a whale, antlers of a stag, face of a camel, talons of eagles, ears of a bull, feet of a tiger, and the eyes of a lobster. Sometimes it has a flaming pearl under its chin. The Chinese dragons are synonymous with water and are said to be the masters of rainfall, waterfalls, rivers and seas. This could partly explain the serpent-like form, as a swimming mechanism similar to an eel, or perhaps the wavy snake-like shape was the reason these dragons became associated with water. Shen. The Shen is another type of dragon from Chinese mythology, but it is not quite the same as a regular Chinese dragon. It is a shape-shifting dragon, or shellfish-type sea monster, believed to create mirages. The Shen's true form is that of an enormous serpentine dragon adorned with glistening green and gold scales. It constantly writhes in a pattern of twirls and knots. They are rarely seen in their true form and prefer to appear as a pheasant, shellfish, or pearl. Instead of sleeping, a Shen might spend years or decades as a pearl before emerging again in their natural form. The African dragon. African dragons are not as well known as their Western or Asian counterparts. In fact, these dragons look quite different from our traditional representation of dragons. Most African dragons have the appearance of giant snakes, and depending on the story, they sometimes have legs and sometimes not. These snake-like dragons have appeared many times throughout African culture, whether in mythology, religion, or tribal tales. Stories about these creatures have been found in countless towns and villages throughout Africa. Wyvern. Wyverns are winged, serpent-like creatures. Unlike most dragons, the wyvern only has 2 legs, a barbed tail, and cannot breathe fire. It is typically depicted resting upon its legs and tail, but may be depicted with its claws in the air and only supported by its tail. On occasion, a wyvern may be depicted as wingless and with its tail narrowed. It often appears as a mascot or on a logo. Lindworm. The Lindworm is a dragon with a serpent-like body and doesn't have hind legs. Portrayals vary across countries, and in the stories in which they do appear, the creature generally appears as wingless with a serpentine body, dragon's head, scaled skin, and 2 clawed forelimbs. Depictions imply lindworms do not walk on their 2 limbs like a wyvern, but move like a mole lizard. They slither like a snake and use their arms for traction. Amphiptere. Amphiptere is a dragon with a serpent or snake-like body that doesn't have arms or legs, only wings. Amphipteres generally were said to have light-coloured feathers like a sunrise, and serpentine body similar to a lindworm, bat-like wings with feathers covering most of the forearm and often greenish in coloration, and a long tail much like a wyvern's. Others are described as entirely covered with feathers, with a spiked tail, bird-like wings and a beak-like snout. Even more uncommon is the description of one with legs. Hydra. Hydra is one of the most notorious dragons, uniquely dangerous and difficult to defeat, mostly because of its many heads, but the exact number of which varies according to the source. It was said that it had the power of regeneration. If you cut off one of its heads, two will grow instead. In the canonical Hydra myth, the monster is killed by Hercules as the second of his 12 labours. The largest of the Hydra's heads is immortal and cannot be damaged by conventional weapons. The only way Hercules was able to kill this head was to cut it off with a golden sword gifted to him by Athena. Tarasque. The Tarasque is a fearsome, legendary dragon-like mythological hybrid from Provence in southern France. The description of the monster is vivid and detailed, and by no means that of a conventional dragon. It was fatter than an ox, longer than a horse, with a lion's face and head, teeth as sharp as swords, a horse's mane, its back as sharp as an axe, bristling and piercing scales, 6 feet with bear's claws, a serpent's tail, and a shell on either side, like a tortoise. Zmei. The Slavic version of the dragon is called Zmei Gorinich, which means snake of the mountains. The legends depicted the dragon as a terrible snake with 3 heads and 7 tails. A flame blazes from his nostrils, smoke belches from his ears, copper claws sparkle on his paws. The Bakunawa. The Bakunawa is actually a deity that was represented as a serpentine dragon, according to Filipino mythology. He has 2 sets of wings, whiskers, a red tongue, and a mouth the size of a lake. The Filipinos once thought that the Bakuana lived in the sea at the time when the world had 7 moons, and that dragons, being fascinated by their light, would rise out of the sea into the sky and consume the moons. Thus, the dragons were the cause of eclipses. Wyrms. Wyrms are serpentine dragons, normally of European origins. The word, derived from the Norse ormr, used to mean all dragons, but in modern use it is reserved for dragons with worm-like qualities, a long body shape which is either legless or with small legs. Chaos dragons. Here are a set of dragons that are found in different mythologies and even in the Bible, which could bring the end of the world. The most well-known are the following 3. Jörmungandr. Jörmungandr, in Norse mythology, is a huge dragon-type monster, also known as the Serpent of Midgard or Serpent of the World. It is the middle child of Loki, god of mischief, and the giantess Angrboda. According to the Prose Edda, Odin took Jörmungandr and threw it into the great ocean that surrounds Midgard. The serpent grew so large that it was able to encircle the earth and grab its own tail. It is an example of an Ouroboros. Upon releasing the tail, Ragnarok will begin. Ragnarok is the end of the world in Norse mythology. Apophis. Apophis, also called Apep, was an ancient Egyptian demon of chaos, who had the form of a serpent and, as a foe of the sun god Ra, represented all that was outside the ordered cosmos. Although many serpents symbolized divinity and royalty, Apophis threatened all living life and symbolized evil. Leviathan. The Leviathan is a huge and fierce water monster, mentioned in several books of the Bible. Mention occurs in the books of Job, Psalms, and Isaiah, and there are several traditional Jewish prayers that also include the Leviathan. It is often depicted as a large water dragon, sometimes with multiple heads. The Leviathan is often an embodiment of chaos and threatens to eat the damned after their life. In the end, it is annihilated I hope you learned more than you already knew about dragons, the most popular creatures from mythology. I sure did. Thank you for watching. Yours truly, Mythos, the Historian.